So I was told, don't touch anything, don't talk politics, and just return the alien kid if you find one.
Easy.
I'm human, not a barbarian. Well, not always. Don't touch anything. Don't talk politics. If you find a lost alien kid, return it politely and walk away. That was the entirety of Jim Keller's briefing before his drop onto Grelac 4. No weapons, no team, no real mission, just a quiet observational assignment. Which was admin speak for keep your head down and smile until they forget you're there. Jim could do that. Smiling was his specialty. He stepped through the smoky dusk of the outer bazaar, a maze of spire-shaped huts, blinking neon fungi, and oily steam from boiling alien stew pots. The smell of wet copper and overcooked mushrooms hung in the air. A few multi-eyed merchants hissed when he passed, clutching their wares like he might bite. He didn't blame them. Humanity's reputation had evolved from curiosity to caution. These days, Terran smiled too much and said too little. Jim wore his usual diplomatic getup, soft boots, unarmed belt, and a jacket with more coffee stains than medals. He looked like someone who got lost on his way to a maintenance bay. Which made it even funnier when he found the kid. It was huddled between a trash drone and a vat of bubbling kelp, making a noise halfway between a hiss and a hiccup. About knee-high, its insectoid frame trembled under a shawl of woven feathers. 6 limbs. Big eyes. The kind of creature that would star in a galactic wildlife PSA titled, "Do not pet this." Jim squatted. "Hey, little guy. You okay?" The child hissed, paused, then sniffled like a short-circuited blender. One glossy eye stared up at him. He sighed, digging into his jacket. "Please tell me snacks are still universal." He produced a squished protein bar, cherry-flavored, because of course. The kid leaned forward, sniffed it, and snatched it so fast Jim nearly fell backward. "All right. So you like Terran carbs? You and half the galaxy." He glanced around. "Where are your grown-ups?" Nothing but the buzz of flies and the grumble of distant exhaust vents. Jim stood and gently offered a hand. "Come on. Let's get you back to wherever insect royalty keeps their nurseries." The child stared at him, then took it. That's when the whispers started. The first merchant froze mid-sail, eyes wide. The second dropped his flask. A third backed into a stall and vanished behind a curtain. Jim frowned as a few murmured words filtered through the air like static. "It has returned. The choice, it has been made. He holds the starlight's air." Jim muttered, "Okay, I know I've got resting Messiah face, but this is ridiculous." Still holding the child's hand, he walked toward what looked like a central path through the canyon street. He stopped the first creature that didn't flee, a 4-legged vendor with bark-like skin and glowing nostrils. "Hi. I'm looking for the kid's guardian. Family, temple, hive nanny, anything." The vendor stared at the child, then at Jim, then dropped to one knee with a choking sound. "Great One, forgive our blindness." "Oh no. That's not necessary." Jim raised both hands. "I'm just the delivery guy." Others started gathering, not in anger, not in fear, in awe. Some bowed. Others touched their foreheads to the ground. Somewhere in the distance, bells began to ring. Jim glanced down at the kid, who was now nibbling the bar like it was holy bread. "You're not just lost, are you?" The child chirped once. Figures emerged from the crowd, tall, draped in ceremonial silks, faces hidden behind bone-carved masks. They moved in formation, clearing a path straight to Jim. One stepped forward and spoke with a voice like wind through a cave. "He has returned, bearing the air, as was foretold." Jim blinked. "Okay. That's sweet. But I really need to get this kid home and not become part of someone's prophecy." Another figure spoke. "You have completed the trial of kindness. You have been marked by the touch. The touch. He looked down. The child's hand was glowing faintly blue, where it held his. That's probably just Terran sugar interacting with alien enzymes. No biggie. They weren't listening. The robed figures formed a circle, chanting softly. The crowd swelled behind them, dozens, no, hundreds, filling the canyon from floor to ledges. The lead figure stepped forward and said with reverent finality, "We welcome you, starborn strategist, as the rightful guide of the Children's Council. You have returned, just as the stars decreed." Jim stared at him, then at the kid, then at the protein bar still half-eaten. "Oh no," he whispered. "This is one of those situations." He opened his comm, dialing HQ. A soft beep, followed by static. Dead channel. Of course. He looked down at the child, now wrapping its tiny arms around his leg like a fuzzy grenade. "Okay, buddy," he sighed. "Guess we're both in this now." The crowd chanted louder. Above them, the twin moons began to rise, casting a blue glow across the canyon walls. Jim adjusted his jacket, brushed crumbs off his shirt, and cleared his throat. "Right. First rule of Terran leadership: smile like you know what you're doing, and figure out how deep the hole is after you fall in." The chanting reached a crescendo. Jim smiled. "Let's go meet the in-laws." Jim Keller had been escorted through a half-mile of torchlit caverns, each one carved with glowing symbols, mossy banners, and very nervous-looking guards. His entourage had doubled since the canyon. Now at least 20 robed figures flanked him. They hadn't said much. They didn't need to. Between the hushed reverence and the occasional blessings upon the strategist, Jim had a growing suspicion that someone somewhere had seriously overread his resume. At his side, the alien child shuffled along proudly, still nibbling the last crumbs of the Terran snack bar like it was communion. It hadn't let go of Jim's sleeve. That detail wasn't helping. They arrived at a towering archway made of black stone, humming faintly as if alive. The lead-robed figure stopped and raised both hands. "Behold," the alien intoned, "the Chamber of Convergence." Jim blinked at the arch. "It's really nice. Is this where I get to politely return the kid and sneak back to my ship?" The figure didn't respond. Instead, a crystalline door slid open with a chime that sounded suspiciously like a harp being nervous. Inside was a circular room filled with an audience, creatures of all kinds, seated in a spiral around a central dais. Some looked curious. Some fearful. One looked like a stack of armor with too many swords. Great. A hunched alien with a translucent skull and 12 fingers floated forward in a chair made of vines. It spoke. "You bring the air." "I found a child," Jim replied cautiously. "It was near some garbage and a soup stand. I just figured lost kids shouldn't stay lost." A chorus of gasps swept the room. "He figured it," one elder whispered. "He found and chose," another echoed. Jim held up a hand. "Okay, hold on. I didn't choose anything. There were no forms, no job interviews, no soul-forging tests of worthiness. I gave the kid a snack and a ride." The armor stack alien shifted, and in doing so, fulfilled the test of compassion, the rite of reconnection, and the prophecy of the kind blade. That sounds way more poetic than what actually happened. A crystalline being flickered with blue light. The humans do not speak plainly. Their words hide layers. We must listen deeper. Jim sighed. "I literally meant I handed over trail mix." The room fell quiet. Every face turned toward him, some reverent, others downright scared. One lizard-like elder was visibly sweating. Jim scratched the back of his neck. "Look, I'm not a prophet. I'm not a tactician. I'm a Terran logistical officer who once accidentally led a security drill using a pizza menu." The floating elder stared. "And yet here you are." "Yeah," Jim muttered. Funny that. A gong rang in the distance. The lead-robed figure stepped forward. It is tradition that the chosen be tested in 3 ways, that they may prove they are ready to guide the fractal tribes. Oh no. You have passed the first, the lost child test. I didn't even study. The second is the trial of vision. 2 masked attendants approached with a tray. On it sat 3 seemingly identical stones. One vibrated faintly. One was warm. One shimmered like oil. Jim stared. Let me guess. One turns me into vapor. One makes me a god. And one sends me back to Earth with a coupon for bad coffee. The floating elder nodded slowly. That is, surprisingly close. Jim leaned forward, hand hovering. Then, without hesitation, he picked the warm one. The chamber murmured again. Did I pass? He asked. Why did you choose that stone? The elder pressed. I'm Taran. Warm means powered. Powered means working. Working means progress. And also, it wasn't humming. Humming stones usually explode. Silence. Then the elder chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound like shifting tectonic plates. Practicality laced with insight. Human to the core. Jim tilted his head. So that's a yes? Indeed. The third test was not announced. It simply happened. The condescending prince from earlier stepped forward, robes now metallic and lined with violet scales. He sneered, eyes locked on Jim. This is a farce, the prince hissed. We cannot hand leadership to an outsider who feeds candy to heirs. Jim raised an eyebrow. Protein bar. And technically, it was gluten-free. You mock our culture. I mock everyone equally. The prince drew a ceremonial blade, etched with runes and way too much drama. Trial by blade. Jim stepped back. Whoa, hey. I don't do sword stuff. That's more of a cosplay Tuesday thing. The prince lunged. Jim sidestepped cleanly. The prince stumbled. Jim didn't move again. Instead, he looked bored. You sure this is what you want? He asked quietly. Because I don't want to hurt your pride. Or you. Or the carpet. The prince hissed again and charged. This time, Jim shifted his weight, caught the blade hand, twisted, and gently, almost affectionately, dropped the prince to the floor. He kept a hand on the prince's shoulder. Still breathing? Jim asked. The prince nodded, dazed. Then consider this a diplomatic win. Jim helped him up, patted his shoulder, and whispered just loud enough for the audience to hear. Next time, bring a bigger knife. Or a better reason. When he stepped back, the chamber exploded into whispers. The elder stood slowly. He has passed. The strategist walks again among us. Jim opened his mouth, closed it, and finally said, This is getting out of hand. The robed figure bowed deeply. No. This is just the beginning. The storm above the canyon had quieted, but something heavier hung in the air. Not just moisture. Not just heat. Expectation. Jim Keller stepped out from the trial hall, carrying the child on his back. The council had said nothing since he emerged, but every eye in the temple, every whisper in the crowd, focused on him with a singular, unnerving clarity. He didn't like it. Not because he feared them, but because he recognized it. Reverence. The kind you couldn't buy. Or fake. A figure approached, robes layered like glacier stone, slow and deliberate. It was the same elder who'd warned him before trial 1. You carried the child when you were not required to, the elder said, voice like cooled magma. He was tired, Jim replied. This was not compassion, the elder murmured. It was command. In our laws, the one who bears the burden and leaves no blood becomes the path. Jim blinked. I'm sorry, are you saying I passed by not fighting? Yes, the elder said. No Terran ever has. Jim rubbed the bridge of his nose. So let me get this straight. I walked through a cavern, didn't step on any rituals, didn't kill anything, and now, what? You think I'm the chosen one? The elder bowed. You are not the chosen one. You are the one who chose differently. That distinction matters more. He turned and walked away, robes trailing behind like slow lightning. Jim muttered under his breath, "Terrific. I'm leading a people who love riddles and hate straight answers." Behind him, the child made a contented warble. It sounded smug. That night, the firelight danced along walls of carved obsidian. Elders gathered in silence as Jim stood alone before them, arms crossed. The child now sat beside him, legs dangling off a ledge, staring with huge reflective eyes at the council. "You were supposed to return the child," the speaker finally said. "Not take the trial. And certainly not pass it." "I didn't try to pass," Jim said. "I tried to avoid stepping on some sacred tiles and getting disintegrated. That's just self-preservation." The speaker nodded. "And yet, every step was the correct one. You walked as if the temple belonged to you." Jim didn't smile. "We were taught how to walk before we were taught how to talk. Military habit." A different elder spoke, voice cautious. "You didn't hesitate. Not once. You didn't call for help. Didn't scan for exits. You simply kept going forward." Jim looked up at them. "What were you expecting? That I'd break?" The speaker leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "No. We expected you to fight. To hack the system. To do what humans always do. Smile, then destroy." Jim took a breath. Then walked 2 slow steps forward. "Maybe we're tired of that reputation." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small Terran ration bar. Snapped it in half. Tossed one piece to the child. Kept chewing the other. "Or maybe," he said, "you've been watching the wrong humans." The council went silent again. Then, like a ripple in still water, the elders began to stand. Not dramatically. Not in protest. In recognition. "You cannot return the child now," the speaker said. "To do so would break the rite. And shame the people." Jim raised an eyebrow. "So what am I supposed to do? Babysit forever?" The elder placed a hand on the child's head. "You are now bonded. He chose you." The child chirped and immediately climbed into Jim's lap, like this had been the plan all along. Jim groaned. "I'm getting promoted faster than my last job." And that one ended with an exploding forklift. Outside the temple, the alien city shimmered in the cold morning fog. Buildings curled like ancient shells. Markets reopened. Music returned to the alleys. Yet everywhere Jim walked, people bowed. Not low. Not fearful. But deliberate. Measured. One merchant knelt and pressed a woven band into his hand, dyed with Terran colors. Another handed him a cup of something bitter and thick. He drank it without flinching. Children followed him in silence. The child at his side looked up, voice soft for the first time. "They think you'll stay." Jim didn't answer right away. He glanced at the sky. He knew where the Terran ship sat cloaked beyond the moon, watching. Waiting. "I think," he said, "they're hoping I'll teach them why I walk the way I do." He turned to the child. "You know what happens when you follow someone who doesn't want power?" The child blinked. "They leave." Jim shook his head. "Worse. They stay." The child smiled. That evening, a new chamber opened beneath the temple. Lit by bioluminescent roots and old machines, it showed murals, human-shaped figures surrounded by alien species. One particular figure stood still while others knelt. And above them, carved in 2 languages, "We follow the one who stood still while others ran." Jim stared at it a long time. "They saw this before we ever arrived?" he asked. The elder beside him nodded. "We did not know it referred to a Terran. We assumed it meant a prophet. Or a destroyer." Jim exhaled. "I'm not either." The elder placed a hand on the mural. Then maybe you're the one who writes what it really means. In the quiet hours, Jim sat alone outside the temple, watching the twin moons rise. The child curled beside him, finally asleep. He tapped a hidden button inside his sleeve. A Terran voice responded instantly. Status. Jim replied quietly, Phase 1 complete. They've made me their leader. Understood. Ready to initiate next step. Jim looked at the stars. Then at the child. Then back to the dark horizon, where old fleets slept behind cloaking arrays. He replied, Not yet. They need to see why. And I need to know they mean it. A pause. You're delaying strategic momentum. No, Jim said. I'm creating something better. Better. Jim's voice dropped to a whisper. Loyalty. He cut the calm. And in the silence, the stars above didn't blink. They listened. The ceremonial fire still burned behind Jim Keller when the council chambers emptied. The cavern walls shimmered faintly from residual energy, part heat, part something older. Something watching. Jim stood alone now, the child at his side. It had curled against his leg, fast asleep, purring like a soft engine. He tapped his comm. Static. He tried again. Changed frequencies. The encrypted line flickered. A voice came through, calm, clipped, Terran. Keller, report. He glanced around. Phase 1 completed. Integration successful. Locals believe I'm some kind of foretold leader. Possibly God-adjacent. Good. Proceed to Phase 2. Authorization. Overwatch Black. Jim raised an eyebrow. You sure? They're still calling me strategist. Kind of like being crowned homecoming king by a cult. Confirmed. They chose you. That's all we needed. Begin extraction cascade. The line cut. Jim slipped the comm back in his sleeve and sighed. He looked down at the child. You might want to wake up, kiddo. The child's eyes opened slowly, blinking with eerie awareness. No fear. No confusion. It had known all along. You're not really lost, are you? Jim asked gently. The child nodded once. Jim smirked. Of course you're not. You're bait. Behind him, the mountain trembled. Moments later, the cavern door burst open with a sound like shattering ice. A towering figure entered, gleaming armor of obsidian and gold, face hidden beneath a helmet shaped like a fanged eclipse. 10 more followed, weapons drawn. The Drothek's warlord. Terran, the warlord growled, stepping forward. You have manipulated sacred trials. Violated ancient law. Claimed power that is not yours. Jim remained still. Come. One hand tucked into his coat pocket. I returned a child, he said mildly. You're the ones who turned it into an event. You were meant to fail, the warlord spat. This was our trap. A test to expose human overreach. You were never supposed to pass. Jim tilted his head. And yet here I am. Breathing. Crowned. Liked by children. The warlord drew a plasma blade. You will surrender the child. Now. Jim smiled softly. You still think this is about the child? The blade surged. Behind the warlord, half his soldiers tensed, unsure. Jim moved his thumb slightly, pressed something against the inside of his sleeve. Elsewhere, in orbit, something woke up. A cloaked Terran relay station began transmitting a silent pulse. The signal spread across a dormant net of microsatellites seeded weeks ago in aid packages and mining drones. One by one, the fleet signatures of half a dozen major alien powers blinked out. The warlord's blade flickered. He looked down at his comms bracer. Error. Signal lost. Entire fleets had just gone dark. You didn't come to lead us, the warlord whispered. You came to disable us. Jim finally stepped forward. I came to see who would take the bait. Who would reach for the crown thinking we'd never notice. He glanced at the child, now standing calmly at his side. We've done this before. Smile. Offer help. Let them underestimate us. Then wait. The warlord snarled and raised his blade. Jim didn't flinch. From behind the council pillars, armored Terran operatives emerged silently. No grand entrances. No speeches. Just calm, clinical presence, uniforms matte black, eyes unreadable. The warlord froze. Jim adjusted his collar. The funny part is, you were right. It was a trap. Just not your trap. You'll never hold the council, the warlord hissed. The species will rise against you. Jim nodded. Maybe. But by the time they do, your ships will be dust, your networks overwritten, and your own people will think we're the ones that saved the child. He paused. Narrative is a hell of a weapon. The warlord lunged. He didn't make it 3 steps. The child raised one hand. A pulse of blue light erupted, not destructive, not loud, just final. The warlord collapsed, unconscious. Alive. Disarmed. His blade shattered beside him. Jim looked at the child. You've been holding that in, haven't you? The child chirped softly. Jim turned to the silent council elders filtering back into the chamber. Their faces held a mix of awe, confusion, and rising dread. I told you, Jim said politely, I didn't want this role. But the moment I picked up that kid, your system crowned me. And I let it happen. The crystalline elder stepped forward, voice trembling. You orchestrated all of this? Jim smiled. I participated. We humans are team players. He walked to the center of the dais, the child beside him, operatives forming a quiet circle. He looked up at the stunned council. You wanted someone to pass your ancient trials? You built them to filter out monsters, invaders, and liars? So you got me. A polite Terran logistics officer, who just so happens to understand exactly how to collapse your power structure in 3 sentences and a smile. Silence. No one moved. Then, one by one, the elders dropped to one knee. Some out of fear. Some out of surrender. A few out of respect. Jim reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. He placed it gently into the child's tiny hand. A sticker. Gold foil. Printed back on Earth. You did great. The child beamed. Jim nodded once, voice quiet but firm. This world is under Terran protection now. Not by conquest. Not by force. But because you chose us. And we made sure you couldn't undo it. As he turned, the chamber lights dimmed, syncing with the Terran neural command net activating across the region. One last whisper escaped Jim's lips. We never lose by accident. He stepped through the chamber doors with the child, flanked by Terran shadows. Above, the stars shimmered. And behind them, the galaxy quietly shifted.